So we're getting ready to deliver this tomorrow.
Do you have any advice for another young creative at the start of his journey? I think the opportunities for makers that want to kind of work with their hands are better than they've ever been.
So we're getting ready to deliver this tomorrow. So tomorrow's the big day. We'll be heading out first thing in the morning. So today we're trying to get this loaded up, and it's between 350 and 400 pounds, or at least that's my best guess. So, and there's no obvious place to grab it. It's really nice to have blobby forms, but kind of hard and slippery to pick up. So I screwed 2x lumber to a couple of creepers, and we're gonna try to walk this over onto here. Now the challenge once we get to on site is they're still working out the path for us to do the install. There's a chance we may have to put it on its end to fit through a tight corner in a doorway right before it goes into the gallery that's going to be its home. So just to prepare for that, because it should roll easily on this, but the minute we get into a real tight situation, or if we have to get in a freight elevator, I want to have the option to be able to put it on end. Now, it's 6'8" long, so that's tall as most residential doorways. We're pretty sure the doorways here are higher than that. But just to be on the safe side, to have people push this along on the end, we're going to try to customize a creeper, and we want the end kind of going through a little bit, but obviously not scraping along the ground. But hopefully that'll create sort of like a socket for it to fit into. And also probably need to reinforce this creeper, even though I think it's rated for 1,000 pounds, but Harbor Freight, so you never know. So our task right now is to modify this creeper and get it ready for this tilt up sort of end delivery situation. Just want to have it in your back pocket so you don't get stuck while you're down there and have to make a hardware store run while your workers are waiting. So I got some plywood that I'm going to screw to it, and I drew a rough profile shape there. So I'm going to cut this out with the jigsaw, route the edges so there's nothing sharp, and obviously we'll pad it with some blankets and stuff, and then slowly build up this creeper so that it can withstand all the weight. Now, once we get it onto the flat creepers, we're going to have to winch it onto the truck. And so we cleared a path here with a ramp. And we'll use the winch that I use for hauling rocks to drag it up onto here. Now what's great about this winch is that it has a slow controlled release. So I should be able to lower it down when we get to the site. Couple things as we go through walkthroughs, which I always recommend doing, is walk through it and pantomime all the steps multiple times, is we want the clearance on the ramp. We don't want a big bump down from there, but we also don't want all the weight on the tailgate. So we're gonna have to do some blocking between our deck system and here that doesn't give us too big of a bump, but just gives us a little more structure and support on the truck bed. We put a piece of steel right here so that, again, we're minimizing the amount of sort of bumps with those little wheels going up. And we tested the clearance of the wheels to make sure everything's sort of aligned. So should be good, but a lot of work to do still.
So the weight is one thing, but it's really the inability with all these smooth curved surfaces to really get a good grip on it that's giving us challenges. We built up the creepers with a lot of layers of either 2x4 or plywood, and then tried to make points that would be easy to slide a ratchet strap through so we can secure the wood parts to the blob itself. Getting the blob off of the blocks and onto the creeper was a little bit dicey. There's a little bit of a height differential, we have to move some things around, worry about things slipping, and gotta try to keep everything safe, but we were able to kind of, through a series of adjustments, get it all reasonably done without anyone getting a smashed finger. I'm really happy with the winch install that I did. This thing has come in handy time and time again. And the most important part isn't the ability to pull it up. I'm sure we could have invited a bunch of people and all pushed it together, which would have been a little bit safe-ish, Probably would have had to build a more complicated ramp with rails so it couldn't slide off to the side and crush somebody. But what I'm really excited about is that when I do the release on this winch, it's a slow, controlled, powered release. And so lowering it down the ramp and keeping this thing from being running away in downtown LA is one less thing to be worried about. So got it all into the truck, and fingers crossed for a smooth installation day tomorrow. So this week's question came via DM on Instagram. It's from Tom from Natural Furnishings. And I first noticed him, he made this really beautiful lamp out of a rock, and he almost used this black piece of slate and then a very classic white lampshade with a brass pole in between. And it's weird that something as heavy as a rock would look like a boat, but the whole silhouette and the way he shot it kind of looks a little bit like a sailboat. And here's his question. Do you have any advice for another young creative at the start of his journey? Pretty broad question, but it's kind of the one I get a lot. Now, I figured I would answer this here so more people would get a little benefit from the answer, but here's my advice for just getting started. Pick a sustainable pace. This isn't a race, both by the nature of you being young or actually by any age. It doesn't matter if you're 50, 60, or in your 20s. Pick a sustainable pace. You don't have to get to the end of this journey really fast. You need to sort of consistently be rewarded and not burnt out by it. So use what you have, don't covet what you don't have. You have a lot to learn in terms of skills, so you don't need all the tools yet, because that would just be more manuals to read. It takes a while to adapt one new tool into your skill set, so you don't need to get them all at once. I always suggest starting with a drill, circular saw, and orbital sander. And what I really like what Tom's doing is he's working with materials that he's finding around him. I think he's in North Wales. So what I would sort of suggest is find the materials that you have access to and that you're interested in working with. Doesn't mean they have to be local and you go pick them up in your yard or when you go hiking in your local environment. It could be something that is a type of material that you want to work with and you order it online. Don't overextend yourself financially. Start with projects that you can afford to implement that aren't putting your sort of financial future at risk. Now, if you get to the point where Tom is, where you're making really beautiful finished things, you might start be thinking about turning it into a business. You don't have to. And if you do it too soon, it's probably not going to be a great business. It'll probably be a mediocre business. And even if you make a few sales for projects that you put a lot of time into, the margin and return on your time might not be great. That's okay. It's still encouragement, and you may recover your material costs. And basically at that point, you're breaking even or getting paid to learn. And even if you're getting paid to learn, even if it's only a little bit, that's a really good situation to be in. Because if you can pay your bills and you're on a track to improving, that's what I would call a sustainable pace, especially if you're enjoying it the whole time you're doing it. The problem with starting and turning into a product line or trying to sell your stuff is that that stuff takes a lot of time. And if you're at a beginner, the stuff you're trying to sell isn't the best work you're going to be doing 2 or 3 years from now. Just because this is the best thing you've ever done, it's not going to be the best thing you ever do. So you might want to just keep experimenting and learning, occasionally sell a piece here or there, pay for more tools, pay for more materials, but almost be in a research and development phase where you're adding skills, defining your visual identity, experimenting with new things, and most importantly, learning how to differentiate what specifically you do versus what a lot of people do. Doesn't mean everything you have to do has to be totally unique, but I think over time, you'll start experimenting and finding things, maybe through mistakes, maybe through intention, that are specific to you. Keep adding new materials into the repertoire and keep evolving and developing those skills. Once you sort of have the first sale where you're like, wait, that wasn't even that hard for me, and I was able to sell it for a lot, that's when I would start thinking about the business side of things. So I'd wait for the high margin item, not the high achievement item. The high achievement item might have taken you 60, 80, or even a couple hundred hours to produce your best work ever. But the world from the outside may not put a monetary value that's commensurate to the amount of time that you put into this project. And that's why I would say, if you think it's your greatest work and you're not getting the sale price for it that really would make it work out in terms of a dollars per hour situation, well then maybe you make something else that doesn't take as long, or maybe you really focus on getting more efficient. It's possible for a task that once took you 100 hours, the next time maybe it only takes you 80, and the time after that 70. And if you make 2 or 3 hours at a time, maybe it comes down to 30 hours each. If then that's when you want to start thinking about how to monetize, is when you've turned a 100-hour project into a 10 or 20-hour project, but it still looks like as good, if not better, than the 100-hour project. That's when you're ready to start thinking about monetization and product lines and these kind of things. So don't try to sell too soon. Try to sell when the value is the highest, not when you have your first finished piece that's great. And some sales will happen accidentally. Just by posting your work on Instagram or social media or YouTube or Pinterest even, there's always a chance that someone will say, hey, can I buy that? I love it when that happens because one, it gives me more space by unloading the object, which I don't want to just throw away. Getting paid, even if it's a small amount, is still better than nothing. That material goes into the war chest for new tools and materials. And that's what I mean by sort of thinking about this sustainably. Now, to get a little more specific to this particular day and age, I think the opportunities for makers that want to kind of work with their hands are better than they've ever been. And I think that has a lot to do with both technology in terms of phones and the internet and all that stuff, but also with the coming of AI. We're in a time where we're going to value simple things that are farm to table more than we do in super complex things that are mass produced. It's just the way it's going to be. It's scarcity. One scarcity is real. The other is trying to use brand to create the illusion of scarcity, or they're trying to do a limited drop. Anytime a brand tells you that's a massive brand with unlimited production capability, that they're doing a limited series, that's them saying there is nothing unique about what we're making. So we have to create arbitrary cultural rules and say that there's this limited sales and put these like serial numbers on them because we're not actually special. Nothing we're making has a moat. Other brands can make things that look very similar. So we have to put all this money into ethereal cultural stuff just to try to create a little sense of value in the finished product. That's stupid. You should pay for real things that are really good. Now, those people are smart, and the skill in successful branding campaigns has its own artistry. And I love a good Nike commercial as much as anyone else. But for someone that's getting started on their maker journey or creative or design process, I would really think more towards, well, your limitations of your own two hands in your immediate environment are unlike anyone else's limitations and opportunities. So let the uniqueness just be baked into your particular situation. Here in Joshua Tree, I have a lot of rocks to work with, so I'm going to work with rocks. I found a really good supplier of these big fir beams, so I'm making my first museum piece out of them. That's the way to kind of think about it. Now, Douglas fir isn't totally unique. People have access to it anyways, but I have easy access to it here. And so I'm using it more and progressing through it and finishing it or figuring out better ways to stain it and process it and burn it. So just let your uniqueness of your situation, which is unlike anyone else's situation, even your own siblings. Birth order makes a difference, and they're all going to have sort of different circumstances around them, even if they're born into the same household. You will be unique if you actually just focus on doing an inventory of where you're at, what you know already, what you want to learn, what you have access to, what materials, what help can you get, and just work furiously with those things, and you'll be just fine. All right, Shane, another round of overrated, underrated.
Let's do it.
Shoot.
Cold plunges.
I always thought they were overrated, and I guess I still kind of think of them that way, but not as much as I used to. I really liked having the cold plunge at the hotel when we were building at the hotel, because when you're building out in 100-degree heat, and it gets to be around like 2 o'clock in the afternoon and you still got 3 more hours, there's something really nice about taking a quick 5-minute cold plunge, and I mean, taking 5 minutes off to do a 30 to 90 second cold plunge. It kind of feels like a shot of espresso and gives you like an ability to finish really strong. But as part of like a health daily practice, overrated.
Filing patents.
Ooh, that's an interesting question. I was talking to some designer friends, whether it be like Nick Baker or Miles from Makes with Miles, about this. I have, I think, a couple patents that I've filed that are under my name. It's time consuming and expensive, and it often comes early in the process before you've proven out the product. And so if you have the money and you're really committed to the idea, it can be worthwhile to give you some defensibility. The companies I know that have kind of done it well is one of the companies that I'm an advisor and an investor for, Hook, which has really innovative snap locking furniture system for flat pack furniture. It can be useful if you're ever trying to sell the business, but it's still going to come down to sort of margins and whether or not you can produce something efficiently. And often before you go through manufacturing, you don't really know if it's going to work. So it can add to the risk of a small business to try to file a patent too soon. It just means that you're really in love with your own idea, and you also have to defend it too. You can't just file it and it automatically stops everyone from doing it. You have to enforce it, and that requires money with lawyers to sort of do cease and desist and all those things. So trademarks, I think, are good. I think more people should probably trademark their artwork, just because it demands then that you get sort of credit if it shows up in sort of TV or a magazine or a broadcast or other photography. But yeah, I would say a little bit overrated or overused.
Sketching.
Sketching's great as long as it doesn't become its own pursuit. I find sketching very useful. My sketches are not beautiful. They're just notes to myself. Now, there are people who I really admire their sketchbooks. Again, our boy Miles has an impeccable sketchbook, and he actually incorporates it into his video, and it's really nicely done. When it comes to me thinking about sketchbooks historically, I think of Leonardo da Vinci. And I would argue that his sketchbooks are his greatest works and the most true to who he was as a designer, innovator, and artist. To be honest, the Mona Lisa does nothing for me. But Da Vinci's sketchbooks, to me, really show who he is. His religious work kind of shows who was paying his bills. But when you see all the innovation and things he was curious about in his sketchbook, I actually feel like that's his favorite body of work for me.
Cryptocurrencies.
Cryptocurrency is interesting. Like, I like the idea of it. The implementation, as with many things, is where it all sort of falls apart. I think there's an interesting documentary by the actor formerly from the OC, Ben McKinsey, I think is his name. He did an interesting thing about it that's very critical of it. I bought Bitcoin at $60 and sold it at $600 and then bought back in again later. So I am by no means an expert. I was enough to sort of see, smart enough to see that there was potential, but I was so afraid of losing my hard drive that it was stored on or its ability that I sold way too soon. But it was, a lot of people have made a lot of money on it. A lot of people I know have made a lot of money on it. A lot of people I know have invested too much into it and not lost everything, but, you know, basically didn't do much with it. So I think, again, when it comes to investing, all the smart people I know say the same things, which is go for low fees, index funds, put the money away. And by no means is this investment advice, but I tend to think that you go with the conventional wisdom here. So kind of overrated.
Renting excavators.
It depends on where you're at. If you're doing stuff in a suburban environment where you have neighbors and there's infrastructure that you can damage, absolutely not. Hire professionals to do it. If you're in a rural situation like I am, it can save you a lot of money, and they're not that hard to drive yourself. So Home Depot and most locations offer them as rentals. And if you're someone on acreage and you want to kind of experiment, go for it.
Matcha.
Matcha's fine as any sort of caffeinated beverages. I don't think there's a single caffeinated beverage that I haven't enjoyed at some point. I think the color is beautiful, and I think there's something to it. So I've had some matcha lattes that are really good, but is it something that would replace coffee for me? No.
Dovetails.
Dovetails are interesting. I've done them a couple times. When I was a teenager, taking woodworking lessons from a family friend. It is a way to make a drawer or a box or something. I always thought box joints made a little bit more sense. I just don't really, I think the closest thing that I like related to them would be like bow ties for repairing big splits and slabs to stabilize them. But I respect them. But I kind of think of it as like beef Wellington. Like, sure, pastry around beef sounds great, but if I'm cooking myself, I'll probably just not try to combine all those things and increase the likelihood of a failure.
Great segue. Tri-tips.
Well, tri-tip is the most underrated cut of meat. To talk about tri-tip, I'll start with fish, obviously. So tuna is obviously like the fish that gets most associated with sushi, and tuna is great. Now, when I go to sushi places, particularly good ones like in Santa Barbara, my favorite one is Arigatos on State Street. The thing I always like there is to end the evening or about midway through to mix in some mackerel. Mackerel is not a prestigious fish. It's sort of a low-end fish. It's one of the easier ones to catch because you don't have to go as deep into the ocean. They're smaller fish. And it has a fishier taste, but I find that it's more distinct, and for me, often the most enjoyable part of the evening. Tri-tips I like because it's more of a communal cut of meat, and it's not trying to be as showy as a tomahawk ribeye. It's also one that slices really well. So it's our go-to group meal cut of beef here at Maker Ranch, and you can feed 5, sometimes 6 people, depending on whether or not Mike from Modern Builds is around, like gobbling it all up. But I think particularly for wood pellet grills, it's phenomenal. So steaks are what I always did when I was in an apartment, because you can do a steak really well on a cast iron skillet, and then maybe you finish it in the oven or vice versa. When it comes to grilling, I don't love grilling steaks on an open or a wood pellet grill. But what the wood pellet grill is great for is temperature control. And so for a thicker cut of meat like a prime rib or a tri-tip, you can really dial that in and come up with like a protocol and a recipe that's very consistent. So I love cooking tri-tip when I have people over on our big Weber pellet grill. It is reliable, it always comes out good, people are always impressed with it, and it's a relatively, for beef these days, an affordable cut of meat.
Hammocks.
Traditional hammocks, I think, are overrated. You just are in like a weird, awkward position. I like cargo net hammocks, but those you need a big place to do them. I still think outdoor mattresses are way more comfortable and way more loungy than any kind of like string bag. There's sort of a novelty, particularly on indoors with like an elevated loft, or if you have high ceilings, if people put like a big cargo net hammock, that can create a really cool moment. But I don't find them really practical places to hang out in. So they're okay, but I really think they're at their best when it's in like a catamaran and you're over the water on that net. But I may have an interesting hammock idea in the future that might be a little bit more of a sculpture project.
Last one, 3D printers.
3D printers are incredible. It's just the question is, what are you going to print? And I've never been a big cosplay person or wanting to make a whole bunch of like plastic figurines or trinkets. But what you have with a 3D printer is the ability, whatever you can model, you can make. Now, you're limited often in size, and I want to do things bigger and bigger. Now, there are a lot of bigger 3D printers on the market or coming to the market. So I'll probably be getting one of those soon. I like using them as infrastructure to a project. So I think they're great for concrete molds, and that's what most of my 3D printing has been about. If I was to ever get into ceramics, I would probably pair a 3D printer with a kiln and with a workshop full of clay to really do my form making out of the plastic, but my finished product out of fired clay. I gotta finish ratcheting down the big blob and getting that packed up. A little nervous about this. Tomorrow's a big day. So follow along on the Instagram stories and see if it was a disaster or a massive success. Either way, Jesse, Shane, and Brett will all be there, so it'll be a lot of fun. And you'll probably see weird stuff in the stories. All right, thanks. Bye.